I didn't mind paying for her English classes. I wanted her to grow, to feel proud of herself. She said she was shy about her accent. I thought I was helping the woman I'd marry. But one day I overheard her on a video call, laughing, flirting, saying, "I love you," and it wasn't for me. The internet cafe smelled like instant coffee and cigarettes. Mayla sat beside me, her fingers still hovering over the keyboard after closing her first English lesson. The instructor's face had just disappeared from the screen, leaving us alone with the hum of old computers and electric fans. She turned to me with those dark eyes that had drawn me in from the first day I met her at the resort. "Thank you for believing in me," she said, her voice soft and careful with each English word. "I want to be better, for you." I felt something warm spread through my chest. 3 months of lessons paid in advance, plus the laptop I'd bought her the week before. It wasn't about the money. Hell, what else was I going to spend it on? Back in Montana, I'd been rattling around that empty house like a marble in a coffee can. Here, watching her practice pronunciation with such determination, I felt useful again, needed. "Your accent is beautiful," I told her, meaning it. "But if this makes you feel more confident, then I'm proud to help." She smiled and reached for my weathered hand with her small fingers. "You are different, Royce. You see me as more than just." She paused, searching for words. More than just a girl from the province. The cafe owner's daughter, maybe 8 years old, ran past our table chasing a kitten. Mayla laughed at the scene, and I found myself memorizing the sound. In 6 months I'd gone from a man counting down his remaining years to someone planning a future again. The fiancé visa paperwork was already started back in my hotel room. "What did your teacher say today?" I asked, genuinely interested. "She says my grammar is good, but I need practice with conversation." Real conversation, not just tourist English. Mayla opened a notebook filled with her careful handwriting. "She wants me to practice 1 hour every day, speaking with native speakers online." "That's smart," I said, though something twisted briefly in my stomach. The idea of her talking to other men, even for lessons, bothered me more than I wanted to admit, but I pushed the feeling down. This was about her growth, her confidence. "I can help you practice too. You already do so much." She closed the laptop gently, like it was made of glass. "When I was little, I dreamed of speaking perfect English. I thought maybe I could work in Manila, or even abroad someday, but dreams cost money." I watched her pack the laptop into the padded case I'd bought to protect it. Every movement was careful, grateful. This woman understood the value of what I was giving her. Back home, my ex-daughter-in-law had thrown my late wife's jewelry in a drawer like it was costume junk from a yard sale, but Mayla treated a second-hand laptop like it was made of gold. "Dreams shouldn't die because of money," I said. "That's what savings are for. What good is it doing me sitting in a bank in Billings?" She stopped packing and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Surprise? Gratitude? Something else? "In 3 months, I will speak like an American girl," she said, grinning. "Maybe you will not recognize me." I chuckled, but part of me wondered if that was what I wanted. The shy waitress who looked at her feet when she spoke, who laughed behind her hand at my terrible jokes about American weather, who made me feel like a man worth knowing again. Would I lose that version of her? "I'll recognize you," I said, more seriously than I intended. "I'll always recognize you." We walked out into the humid evening air, past vendors selling grilled fish and teenagers on motorcycles. She slipped her hand into mine as we navigated the crowded sidewalk, and I felt that same rush I'd felt as a young man walking with my wife through the county fair. Hope, purpose. The feeling that tomorrow would be better than today because I had someone to build it with. "Next week, I start the conversation classes," she said as we reached the jeepney stop. 1 hour, 3 times a week, just talking to Americans and British people who want to help Filipinos learn. "That's perfect," I said, though that twist in my stomach returned. I told myself it was just protective instinct. After losing Sarah to cancer, then watching my daughter slip away into her own grief, I couldn't bear the thought of losing someone else. But Mayla wasn't going anywhere. She was learning English so we could build something together. As we climbed into the packed jeepney, she whispered, "Thank you, Royce, for seeing who I can become." I squeezed her hand as we bumped along the potholed road back to the resort. For the first time in 5 years, I wasn't just surviving each day. I was building toward something, teaching someone, loving someone who loved me back. I had no idea I was financing my own heartbreak. 5 years. That's how long I'd been moving through life like a ghost haunting his own house. Sarah's death had taken more than my wife. It took my sense of direction, my reason for getting up each morning, my belief that tomorrow mattered more than yesterday. The house in Billings felt like a mausoleum. Every room held conversations we'd never finish, plans we'd never complete. When I finally sold it, my daughter Katie barely spoke to me for 3 weeks. "How could you sell Mom's house?" she'd asked, as if keeping the empty rooms would bring Sarah back. But what she didn't understand was that I was dying in that house. Slowly, quietly, like a plant in a dark corner that everyone forgets to water. I'd wake up, make coffee for one, eat dinner standing at the kitchen counter, and fall asleep watching television shows that didn't matter. The auto body shop had given me a generous pension, but money doesn't keep you warm at night or laugh at your stories. That's how I ended up in Palawan. Not because I had some grand plan or exotic fantasy. I was just tired of living for nobody, including myself. The resort was nothing fancy. Bamboo cottages with thin walls and geckos that chirped all night. But the first morning, when I walked out to breakfast and saw the turquoise water stretching toward mountains I couldn't pronounce, something in my chest loosened for the first time in years. Mela was working the breakfast shift, carrying plates of rice and dried fish to guests who barely looked up from their phones. She moved quietly, efficiently, almost invisible to the other tourists. But I noticed how she smiled at the elderly couples, how she helped the confused German man point to what he wanted on the menu, how she quietly refilled coffee cups without being asked. When she brought my plate, I said, "Thank you, miss. This looks delicious." She stopped, surprised. Most guests treated the staff like furniture. "You are welcome, sir. I hope you enjoy." Her English was careful, practiced, but her accent made every word sound like music. I found myself lingering over breakfast, ordering second cups of coffee I didn't want, just to hear her voice when she asked if I needed anything else. "Are you here for long?" she asked on the third morning, wiping down my table with more attention than it needed. "I'm not sure," I said honestly. "I don't have anywhere else I need to be." She tilted her head, curious. "No family waiting for you?" The question should have hurt, but coming from her, it felt like genuine concern rather than pity. "My family is complicated. What about you? Do you have family here?" "My mother lives in the mountains. She is sick, so I work here to send money for medicine." Mela folded the cleaning cloth carefully. "But someday I want to do more than clean tables." "What would you want to do?" She glanced around to make sure her supervisor wasn't listening. "I want to work online. Maybe customer service for international companies, or teaching Filipino children who live in America. But my English..." She shrugged, embarrassed. "Your English is better than you think," I said, meaning it. "You just need confidence." That was the first time I saw her really smile. Not the polite service smile, but something genuine that reached her eyes. "You are kind, Mr. Royce, just Royce." I extended my hand, and she shook it with surprising firmness. "I am Mela, and you are not like the others." I didn't ask what she meant by the others. I was just grateful to be seen as different, as someone worth knowing. In Montana, I'd become invisible. The widower who lived alone, who spoke to grocery store cashiers just to hear another human voice. Here, this young woman looked at me like I mattered. Over the following weeks, our conversations grew longer. She'd take her breaks at my table, asking about America, about my life before retirement, about why I'd come so far from home. I found myself looking forward to breakfast like a teenager waiting for a phone call. "You must miss your wife," she said one evening as I sat by the beach bar, nursing a beer and watching the sunset. I'd told her about Sarah during one of our talks. How we'd met in high school, married young, worked side by side to build a life that cancer stole in 8 brutal months. "Every day," I admitted. "But missing her was killing me. I had to learn to live again." Mela sat beside me on the low wall, her work shift finished. "My father died when I was 12. My mother missed him so much she forgot to live. I promised myself I would not make that mistake." "Smart girl," I said, watching her profile in the fading light. She was beautiful, but that wasn't what drew me to her. It was her quiet strength, her determination to rise above circumstances that would have crushed someone with less character. "Maybe we can help each other remember how to live," she said quietly. That night, lying in my bamboo cottage listening to the waves, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. The sense that tomorrow might bring something good instead of just another day to get through. I was a 60-year-old man who had loved deeply and lost everything. She was a 26-year-old woman with dreams bigger than her small village could contain. I should have seen the red flags from the beginning. But when you've been drowning, you don't question the life preserver. You just grab on and hope it's real. I want to show you something, Mela said, leading me down a narrow path away from the resort. We'd been together for 3 months, and I'd started thinking of us as we instead of I. She carried a small basket filled with bottles of coconut oil and hand-woven coasters her aunt made in the mountains. "What is this?" I asked, though I already suspected. "My business idea." She spread a colorful cloth on a flat rock and arranged her products carefully. Tourists always want authentic Filipino crafts, but they buy cheap plastic at the airport. I want to sell real things online, ship them to America and Europe. I picked up one of the bottles. The oil was clear golden, and the label was hand-drawn with surprising artistic skill. "This is beautiful, Mela. How much would you sell these for? Maybe $15? $20 for the big bottles?" She watched my face nervously. "Is that too much?" I'd seen similar products in health food stores in Billings selling for $40. "It's not enough. These are organic, handmade, authentic. You could charge 3 times that." Her eyes widened. "Really? But how would people know to buy them?" That's when I knew I could really help her. Not just with language lessons, but with building something real. You need a website, professional photos, maybe social media to tell the story behind each product. We spent the afternoon planning her online store. I offered to pay for professional product photography and a simple website. The excitement in her voice when she talked about expanding beyond coconut oil to include her aunt's textiles and her cousin's wooden carvings made me feel more useful than I had in years. "You would really help me with all this?" she asked as we walked back toward the resort. "I want to help you build something that lasts," I said. "Something that could support you even if—" I paused, not wanting to sound presumptuous. "Even if what?" "Even if you came to America with me someday." The words came out more directly than I'd planned, but I couldn't take them back. She stopped walking and turned to face me. "You think about that? Me coming to America?" "I think about it every day." My heart was pounding like I was 17 again, asking a girl to prom. "I've started looking into fiancé visas. The process takes time, but if you wanted to—" "I want to," she said quickly, then looked down at her feet. "But I am scared. What if I cannot make friends there? What if I cannot find work?" "That's why the English lessons are so important," I said, relieved she hadn't run away from the idea. "And with your online business you could work from anywhere." That evening, I bought her a new phone with a better camera for product photos. We spent hours in my cottage, setting up lighting with desk lamps and photographing her coconut oil bottles from different angles. She was a natural, suggesting poses and backgrounds that made the simple products look elegant and expensive. "Look at this one," she said, showing me a photo where the evening light made the oil glow like liquid amber. "It looks like something from a magazine." "You have a good eye," I said, meaning it. "This is going to work, Mela. I can feel it." As I uploaded the photos to her new laptop, I found myself calculating budgets in my head. The website would cost maybe $2,000, professional product photos, another $500. Initial inventory to ship to a fulfillment center in the US, maybe $3,000 to start. It was nothing compared to what I'd spent on my truck or the yearly property taxes on the old house. "Royce," she said softly. I looked up from the laptop screen to find her watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "What is it? Why are you doing this for me? Really?" The question caught me off guard. I could have given her the easy answer about wanting to help, about believing in her potential. But sitting there in the yellow lamplight with her handmade products scattered around us, I told her the truth. "Because I love you," I said simply. "And when you love someone, you want to see them become everything they can be." She was quiet for so long I started to worry I'd pushed too hard, too fast. But then she moved closer and took my hands in hers. "I love you too," she whispered. "I want to build our future together. Our future." The words hit me like warm rain after a long drought. For the first time since Sarah's death, I wasn't just surviving. I was planning, dreaming, building something with someone who wanted to build it with me. Over the following weeks, we worked on her online store every evening. I helped her write product descriptions that told the story of each item, the families who made them, the traditions they represented. She practiced her English presentation skills, preparing for the day she'd need to handle customer service calls from American buyers. "When I come to America," she said one night as we reviewed her website mock-up. I want to have my own money. I do not want to be just your wife who stays home. I want that too, I said, surprised by how much I meant it. Sarah had worked alongside me at the shop for 30 years. I respected women who built their own dreams, not women who lived off other people's. You will help me learn about American business? She asked. Taxes and shipping and customer service? We'll figure it out together. I closed the laptop and pulled her close. Partners in everything. She rested her head on my shoulder, and I felt that same sense of rightness I'd felt with Sarah in our early years. Two people working toward the same goals, supporting each other's dreams, building something stronger together than either could manage alone. I should have noticed that she never asked about my dreams, my plans, what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I should have wondered why all our conversations focused on her English, her business, her future in America. But I was so grateful to feel needed again, to have someone to invest in and believe in, that I mistook my generosity for partnership. I was building her future all right, I just didn't realize I wasn't building it with me. The sound woke me at 2 in the morning. Laughter, soft and musical, drifting through the thin walls of our shared apartment. I'd moved out of the resort cottage a month earlier when Mela suggested we could save money by splitting rent on a small place in town. It made sense financially, and I loved the domestic routine of sharing meals and planning our days together. But this laughter was different from the careful, grateful sound she usually made. This was relaxed, flirtatious, genuine. The way a woman laughs when she's completely comfortable with someone. I lay still, listening. The walls were bamboo and plywood, built more for keeping out rain than sound. I could hear her voice clearly, speaking English with a fluency that surprised me. After 4 months of lessons, her pronunciation had improved dramatically, but this was something else. This was conversational, natural, confident. "Oh, you are so funny," she said, and I heard the soft clap of her hands. "Tell me more about your city." My stomach twisted. It could be innocent. A conversation class, maybe, though it seemed late for that, or a friend from her online business group. But something in her tone made me feel like I was eavesdropping on something private, intimate. I slipped out of bed and padded barefoot to the kitchen, telling myself I just needed water. But as I filled a glass from the tap, I couldn't help but listen more carefully. "I wish I could see it," she was saying. "Your photos make it look so beautiful. Someday I will visit, yes?" A pause, then that musical laugh again. "You say such sweet things." I am blushing. My hand tightened on the glass. I'd never heard her talk like this with me. Playful, coy, testing the boundaries of flirtation. With me, she was always grateful, careful, respectful. This voice belonged to a different woman entirely. The floor creaked under my feet as I moved closer to the spare room where she held her classes. The door was closed, but I could see the blue glow of her laptop screen under the gap. "I am tired of talking about grammar," she said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Tell me about your day. What did you eat for breakfast? What color shirt are you wearing?" These weren't language exercises. This was intimacy, the kind of personal conversation that builds connection between two people. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides with a rusty spoon. "Mela," I called softly, knocking on the door. Sudden silence. Then rapid typing, the sound of someone closing windows on a computer. "One moment," she called, her voice bright and artificial. More typing, then footsteps. The door opened, and she appeared in her pajamas, laptop closed and tucked under her arm. "Hi, baby. Did I wake you?" I was just finishing my conversation practice. "It's 2 in the morning," I said, studying her face. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright with an energy I rarely saw anymore. "The teacher lives in Australia," she explained quickly. "Different time zone. We schedule late sessions sometimes." It could be true. It probably was true. But the way she wouldn't meet my eyes, the way she held the laptop protectively against her chest, made something cold settle in my stomach. "How did it go?" I asked, testing. Good. My pronunciation is getting better," she says. "But I am tired now, ready for sleep." She moved past me toward our bedroom, and I caught a whiff of her perfume. The good perfume, the one she wore when we went out to dinner. Why would she wear perfume for an online class? "Who was that?" I asked, following her. "Who was what?" "On the call. You said she, but it sounded like a man's voice." She turned to face me, and for just a moment, I saw something flash across her features. Irritation, fear, but it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Sometimes there are group classes, she said, setting the laptop on the dresser. Men and women together. The teacher pairs us up for conversation practice. She climbed into bed and turned away from me, pulling the thin blanket up to her chin. I am sorry if I woke you. Tomorrow I will use headphones. I stood there in the dark, listening to her breathe. Within minutes, she was asleep, or pretending to be, but I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling and trying to convince myself that everything had an innocent explanation. The woman I'd fallen in love with was shy about her English, embarrassed by her accent, nervous about speaking to foreigners. But the woman I'd heard laughing in the next room was confident, flirtatious, comfortable. Which one was real? I wanted to believe it was just the lessons working, that she was gaining confidence and finding her voice. But something about the way she'd closed that laptop, the way she'd avoided my eyes, made me feel like I was living with a stranger. A stranger I was financing, supporting, preparing to marry. The next morning, she was back to her usual self, quiet, grateful, attentive. She made me coffee exactly the way I liked it and asked about my plans for the day. But when I mentioned her late-night class, she just nodded and said, "The teacher wants me to practice more conversation. It is the hardest part of learning." I wanted to ask more questions, but something held me back. Fear, maybe. The fear that if I pushed too hard, I'd discover something I wasn't ready to know. So I smiled and told her I was proud of her progress, and I pretended not to notice that she'd started keeping her laptop locked with a password. "Sir, you know Mela is chatting other foreigners, right?" Nico's words hit me like a punch to the solar plexus. I was sitting at the resort's beach bar, nursing my second beer and trying to convince myself that everything was normal. Nico was the young bartender, maybe 25, with the kind of easy smile that made tourists tip well. I'd always liked him, but right now I wanted to tell him to mind his own business. "What do you mean?" I asked, though my voice sounded strangled even to me. Nico glanced around to make sure no one else was listening, then leaned closer. "My cousin works at the internet cafe in town. He says she comes in sometimes when you are not there. Always video calls with different white guys. She's taking English classes," I said quickly. "It's normal to practice with different people." "Maybe," Nico said, but his expression suggested he didn't believe it. "I just thought you should know. You are a good man, sir. You deserve good treatment." He moved away to serve another customer, leaving me alone with my beer and a sick feeling in my stomach. I wanted to dismiss what he'd said as gossip, misunderstanding, maybe even jealousy, but it confirmed what I'd been trying to ignore for weeks. The late-night calls, the password-protected laptop, the way she'd started dressing better, even when she was just staying home, the perfume at 2 in the morning. That evening, I waited until Mela was in the shower, then opened her laptop. The password screen stared back at me, and I felt like a criminal. But I was also desperate to prove Nico wrong, to find innocent explanations for everything that had been bothering me. I tried her birthday, then mine, then variations of our names. Nothing worked. I was about to close it when I remembered her talking about her favorite childhood pet, a dog named Lucky, Lucky. The screen unlocked. I felt sick immediately, like I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. But I was already looking at her browser history. Multiple tabs open to Facebook, Instagram, and sites I didn't recognize. Dating sites maybe, or chat platforms. One tab was still open to Facebook, but not her usual profile. This one had the same photo I'd taken of her last month, the one where she was laughing at something I'd said while we walked on the beach. But the name was different. Maya Santos, instead of Mela Season. My hands shook as I clicked through the profile. The bio read, 26, Palawan, looking for love abroad, serious only, dream of living in USA or Europe. There were dozens of photos I'd never seen before. Professional-looking selfies, pictures and outfits I'd bought her, even some taken in our apartment. All posted as if she were single, available, actively searching. The worst part was the comments. Men from Australia, Canada, the UK, America. Beautiful girl, would love to chat. Are you real? You look like an angel. Message me, gorgeous. I live in California. And she'd responded to many of them. Thank you, handsome. Send me a message. I love to meet new people. Tell me about your country. I scrolled back through months of posts. Photos from dates we'd been on together, but cropped to remove me from the frame. Pictures of the products for her online store, posted as if she'd built the business entirely alone. Even the laptop I'd bought her, photographed and posted with the caption, "Working hard for my dreams." The shower was still running, but I knew I didn't have much time. I clicked on her messages, and my worst fears were confirmed. Conversations with dozens of men, all following the same pattern. Sweet, innocent responses that gradually became more personal, more flirtatious. One thread with a man named David from Texas made me physically nauseous. "David, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Are you really single?" Maya, "Yes, I am alone. Looking for someone special to share my life with." David, "What about that old guy in your pictures? Your uncle?" Maya, "He is just a friend who helps me sometimes. He is lonely and I feel sorry for him." I slammed the laptop shut, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. The shower had stopped, and I could hear her moving around in the bathroom. I sat on the bed, staring at the closed laptop, trying to process what I'd just discovered. I wasn't her boyfriend, her partner, her fiancé. I was a lonely old man she felt sorry for, a convenient source of funding for her English lessons, her laptop, her apartment, her dreams of meeting someone else. "Royce?" Mela emerged from the bathroom in a towel, her hair damp and her cheeks pink from the hot water. "Are you okay? You look sick." I looked at her face, searching for some sign of guilt, some acknowledgement of what she was doing, but she just looked concerned, maybe even caring. The same expression she'd worn when she told me she loved me. "I'm fine," I managed, "just tired." She smiled and kissed my forehead before moving to the dresser to get dressed. I watched her, this woman I'd thought I was going to marry, and tried to reconcile the person in front of me with the profiles I'd just discovered online. How long had she been doing this? Had she ever been genuine with me, or was I just one of many lonely foreign men she was cultivating? How many others were sending her money, buying her gifts, planning futures that would never happen? "I have a class tonight," she said casually, pulling on the dress I'd bought her for her birthday. "The teacher wants me to practice business English. For the store." "How long will it be?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Long enough for her to chat with David from Texas, or the man from Australia who thought she was an angel, or whoever else was waiting in her queue of possibilities. "Maybe 2 hours. You can watch your movies." She kissed me again, and I smelled the perfume. Always the perfume for her. Classes. After she left, I sat in the quiet apartment and tried to figure out what to do next. Confront her? Leave? Pretend I'd never seen anything and hope things would somehow go back to normal? But normal was a lie. It had always been a lie. I wasn't building a future with Mela. I was financing her auditions for someone better. 3 days passed before I worked up the courage to really listen. 3 days of pretending everything was normal, while Mela held her classes in the spare room, and I tried to convince myself I'd imagined what I'd seen on her computer. But Friday night, when she locked herself in for another session, I couldn't take the uncertainty anymore. I needed to know exactly what I was paying for. I waited 20 minutes after her door clicked shut, then crept across the living room like a burglar in my own home. The floorboards creaked under my feet, and I froze, holding my breath until I heard her voice again through the thin wall. "Tell me about your job," she was saying in that confident English I barely recognized. "You said you work with computers?" A pause while she listened to his response, then laughter. That same musical sound that had woken me weeks ago. "Oh, that sounds so interesting. I love technology. My boyfriend bought me a laptop for my business, and I am learning so many new things." Boyfriend. The word hit me like a physical blow. Not partner, not fiancé, not the man she loved. Just a convenient category for the person funding her equipment. I pressed my ear closer to the door, knowing I was violating her privacy but unable to stop myself. "Yes, I have a small business selling coconut products. But really, I want to come to America and start a new life." Her voice dropped to a more intimate tone. "I am tired of this small island. I want to see the world." Another pause, then a sound that made my blood freeze. A kissing noise, like she was blowing kisses at the screen. "You are so sweet," she continued. "I wish I was there with you. I would cook Filipino food for you, and you could show me your city." I closed my eyes, leaning against the wall for support. This wasn't language practice or business conversation. This was courtship, seduction, the kind of intimate planning that couples do when they're falling in love. "What do you look like?" she asked playfully. "Send me a photo. I want to see your handsome face." My legs felt weak. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor outside her door, listening to the woman I'd planned to marry flirt with another man using the English skills I'd paid for. "I love talking to you, baby," she said, her voice soft and warm. "I wish I was there. We could go on dates, watch movies together, hold hands on the beach. The same things she did with me, the same activities that had made me feel special, chosen, loved. But apparently they were just rehearsals for the real thing. "Tell me you miss me," she said, and I heard the rustling of fabric, like she was adjusting her position on the bed. "Tell me you think about me." I couldn't listen anymore. I stumbled to my feet and went to the kitchen, pouring myself a large glass of the whiskey I kept for special occasions. But my hands were shaking so badly I spilled half of it on the counter. How many men was she doing this with? How many lonely foreigners were falling in love with her voice, her laugh, her promises of a future together? Was I the only one stupid enough to pay for the privilege, or were there others sending money for her English classes, her business supplies, her dreams of escaping the Philippines? The conversation continued for another hour. I caught fragments through the walls, discussions of visas and travel, compliments about photos he must have sent, more of those intimate laughs that I'd thought belonged to me. When I finally heard her say goodbye and close the laptop, I pretended to be asleep. She slipped into bed beside me, smelling of perfume and satisfaction, and I lay there in the dark feeling like the biggest fool in the world. "How was your class?" I whispered, testing her. "Good," she said sleepily. "The teacher says my conversation skills are really improving. Soon I will sound like a native speaker." Native speaker. Is that what she called the man she'd been flirting with for the past 2 hours? "I'm proud of you," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Thank you for believing in me," she murmured, already drifting toward sleep. "You are helping me become the person I want to be." I stared at the ceiling until sunrise, listening to her breathe and trying to figure out when I'd stopped being her partner and started being her patron. When had love become a transaction? When had building our future become financing her escape? But deep down, I already knew the answer. It had always been a transaction. I'd just been too lonely, too grateful for her attention, to see it clearly. She was becoming exactly the person she wanted to be. Someone confident enough to juggle multiple relationships, skilled enough to make each man feel special, fluent enough in English to charm her way toward whatever opportunity looked most promising. I'd wanted to help her grow. I'd succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. I just hadn't expected to be left behind in the process. The conversation happened on a Tuesday morning over coffee and rice. Normal things, normal sounds, the kind of domestic routine that had made me believe we were building something real together. But nothing about that morning was normal, because I'd finally reached the point where I couldn't pretend anymore. "Who is David?" I asked quietly, stirring sugar into my coffee with more attention than it needed. Mela froze with her spoon halfway to her mouth. For just a second I saw something flicker across her face. Not surprise, not confusion, but calculation, like she was rapidly sorting through possible responses to find the safest one. "David," she repeated, buying time. "The man from Texas. The one you've been chatting with for 3 months." I kept my voice level, conversational, like I was asking about the weather. She set down her spoon carefully and looked at me with those dark eyes that had once made me feel like the most important man in the world. Now they just looked tired. "How do you know about David?" I looked at your laptop. No point in lying or making excuses. I saw the Facebook profile, the messages, all of it. I expected anger, denial, tears. Instead, she just nodded slowly, like she'd been waiting for this moment for months. "I didn't lie to you," she said finally. "You have a dating profile with a different name. You're telling men you're single. You're making plans to visit them." My voice was getting louder despite my efforts to stay calm. "How is that not lying?" "I didn't lie," she repeated, more firmly this time. "I just didn't say." The distinction hit me like a slap. She was right, in the most technical, devastating way possible. She'd never explicitly promised exclusivity, never said she'd stopped looking for other options, never claimed I was the only man in her life. She'd just let me assume all of those things while carefully avoiding any statements that could later be called lies. "So what am I to you?" I asked. "Really?" She was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee like it might hold answers. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but matter-of-fact. "You are a good man who has been kind to me. You helped me learn English, start my business, feel confident about myself. I am grateful. Grateful. The word felt hollow, meaningless. That's it? I care about you, Royce. But I never promised you would be my only choice. Your only choice. I laughed, but it came out bitter and broken. Is that what we're calling this? A choice? What did you think would happen? She asked, and for the first time, there was a hint of impatience in her voice. You are 60 years old. I am 26. You live in America where it is cold and far from my family. I live here where life is hard and there are no opportunities. I thought we were going to build something together. We did build something. I have a business now. I speak good English. I know how to talk to Americans, how to make them like me. You taught me all of that. The casual way she said it made my stomach turn. I hadn't been teaching her to love me. I'd been teaching her to replace me. And David? The others? She shrugged, and the gesture was so casual, so dismissive, that I felt something break inside my chest. David lives in Texas. He has a big house and wants a Filipino wife. The man from Australia works for a mining company and travels a lot. The one from Canada is divorced with grown children. She recited the facts like a business report. I am learning about all my options. Options. I repeated the word, tasting its bitterness. That's what I am. An option. You wanted to help me become confident, independent, successful. I did. You should be proud. I stared at her across the small table where we'd shared hundreds of meals, made thousands of plans, built what I'd thought was love, but now realized was just a very expensive education. The laptop, I said. The English lessons. The business supplies. The rent. You wanted to give those things. I didn't ask. Technically true. I'd offered everything, insisted on paying, felt generous and needed when I opened my wallet. But she'd accepted it all, knowing exactly what she was building toward, and it wasn't a life with me. Did you ever love me? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. She considered the question seriously, which somehow made it worse than if she'd just said no. I loved how you made me feel about myself, she said finally. I loved feeling protected, supported, believed in. I loved the person I became when I was with you. But not me, not actually me. I loved the version of me that existed with you, but that doesn't mean you were my forever choice. The honesty was brutal and perfect. She'd loved being loved, loved being invested in, loved the transformation that my money and attention had made possible. But I'd never been the destination, just a very comfortable rest stop on her journey toward something better. So what happens now? I asked. I don't know. She stood up and began clearing the dishes, moving with the same efficient grace I'd admired for months. That depends on you. On me? You can be angry and leave. You can accept that this is what it is. You can keep helping me until I make my choice. She turned to face me, and her expression was neither cruel nor kind, just practical. But you cannot change what I want. I sat there in the quiet apartment, surrounded by the life we'd built together that had never actually been ours. The laptop humming on the counter. The business supplies stacked neatly on shelves. The photos of us together that she'd cropped and posted to attract other men. I need to think, I said finally. Okay. She kissed the top of my head, the same gentle gesture she'd made 1,000 times before. I will be at work if you want to talk more. After she left, I sat at that table for 3 hours, staring at the 2 empty coffee cups and trying to understand how I'd become a supporting character in my own love story. I'd thought I was rescuing her, but she'd been auditioning me. I'd thought I was building our future, but I'd been financing her escape from me. I'd thought I was teaching her to love, but I'd been training my own replacement. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the realization that she was right. I had wanted to help her become confident and independent. I'd just never imagined that confidence would include the ability to see me clearly enough to know she could do better. I'd succeeded in every goal I'd set. She was fluent in English, financially stable, confident enough to pursue any opportunity that presented itself. I'd just forgotten to make myself irreplaceable in the process. The cheap hotel smelled like disinfectant and other people's disappointments. I'd checked in with just a backpack and the bitter satisfaction of finally taking control of something in this whole mess. The $20 a night room had a bed, a fan, and a view of the parking lot. It was perfect for a man who'd just learned he'd been living in a fantasy. I didn't leave a note. What would I have said? Thank you for the education. Good luck with David from Texas. Sorry for being stupid enough to think this was real. Instead, I left an envelope on the kitchen counter with next month's rent and the apartment key. Everything else, the laptop, the business supplies, the clothes I'd bought her, I left exactly where it was. Let her explain to her online boyfriends how she'd suddenly acquired a windfall of gifts from her grateful friend. The first night in that anonymous hotel room, I sat on the thin mattress and looked through my phone. Photos of us together, messages she'd sent when I was at the resort and she was working. "Missing you already," one said. "Cannot wait to see you tonight," said another. All of it real in the moment, all of it meaningless in the bigger picture. I deleted her contact information. Not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. I knew myself well enough to know that if I kept her number, I'd eventually use it. I'd text her when I was lonely, call her when I was drunk, try to negotiate my way back into whatever small corner of her life she might be willing to spare. The second night, I walked down to the beach and sat on a piece of driftwood, watching fishing boats bob in the moonlight. An old man was mending nets nearby, and we nodded at each other in the universal language of men who'd rather be alone with their thoughts. "Tourist?" he asked in broken English. "I was," I said. "Now I'm just leaving." He studied my face in the dim light. "Girl trouble?" I almost laughed. "Something like that. Filipino girl?" "Yeah." He made a sound that could have been sympathy or amusement. "They are smart. Smarter than us, sometimes." I couldn't argue with that. Mela had played a perfect game, following rules I didn't even know existed. She'd never promised exclusivity, never claimed to love me more than her other options, never said I was anything other than helpful. I'd written the script in my own head and then been devastated when she didn't follow it. "She broke your heart?" the old fisherman asked. "She educated it," I said, surprising myself with the honesty. The third night, I started making plans. Real plans, not fantasies dressed up as logistics. I had enough money saved to stay in the Philippines for another year if I wanted, or I could go back to Montana and figure out what retirement actually looked like for a man with no family and too much time. But the thought of returning to Billings made my chest tight. Not because of the memories of Sarah, those had softened into something manageable over the past year. It was the idea of going back to that life where I waited for nothing, planned for nothing, existed without purpose or direction. Mela had been right about one thing. I had helped her become confident and independent. The problem was, I'd forgotten to do the same for myself. I'd been so focused on building her future that I'd neglected my own. On the fourth night, I walked past our old apartment. The lights were on, and I could see her shadow moving around inside. Part of me wanted to knock, to see if she'd even noticed I was gone, to find out if she missed anything about what we'd had together. But I kept walking. Some conversations don't need to happen. Some endings don't require explanation or closure. Sometimes the most respectful thing you can do is let someone continue their life without your drama cluttering up their path toward whatever comes next. I thought about David from Texas, about whether he was chatting with her right now, planning his own version of our future. Would she be more honest with him? Or was honesty beside the point when you were shopping for the best possible life? Would he be smarter than me? Or would he fall just as hard for the fantasy of rescuing a beautiful woman who didn't actually need rescuing? Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe this was just how modern love worked for people separated by age, culture, and economic opportunity. Maybe I'd been naive to expect traditional romance in a situation that was fundamentally transactional from the beginning. The old fisherman had been right. She was smarter than me. Smart enough to see opportunity where I saw love, practical enough to keep her options open while I was closing mine, wise enough to use my generosity to build herself into someone who wouldn't need my generosity anymore. I couldn't even hate her for it. She'd never hidden her ambition, never pretended to be someone without dreams bigger than what a 60-year-old retired mechanic from Montana could offer. I'd just chosen to hear what I wanted to hear and ignore the rest. On my last morning in that hotel, I called the airline and changed my ticket. Not back to Montana, but to Cebu, another island, another chance to figure out what I actually wanted from whatever years I had left. As the taxi pulled away from Puerto Princesa, I caught a glimpse of the resort where we'd met, the beach where she'd first told me she loved how I made her feel about herself. It looked smaller than I remembered, less romantic, just a collection of buildings where lonely people temporarily intersected before moving on to whatever came next. I didn't look back after that. Some chapters close with drama and confrontation. Others just end when you stop reading and put the book down. I was finally ready to start writing my own story again. The language center smelled like chalk and hope. Volunteers from a dozen countries sat around folding tables, helping Filipino workers practice the English they'd need for jobs in Dubai, Singapore, Canada, anywhere that offered better wages than they could earn at home. I'd been coming here 3 mornings a week for 6 months, and it had become the best part of my week. "Mr. Royce," said Elena, a nurse who was preparing for a position in Kuwait, "can you help me practice job interview questions?" I pulled up a chair across from her and opened the folder of sample questions we'd developed together. Elena was 35, married. With 2 kids she'd be leaving behind for 2 years to earn money for their education. The sacrifice was enormous, the separation heart-wrenching, but the opportunity was real. "Tell me about your experience with pediatric care," I said, adopting the formal tone of a hiring manager. Elena straightened her shoulders and launched into her prepared response. Her English was careful but clear, and I could see the confidence building with each session. Unlike my experience with Mela, this felt honest. Elena needed these skills for a specific job with a specific salary that would support her specific family. No hidden agendas, no secret profiles, no other options being cultivated in parallel. "Very good," I said when she finished. "But remember to smile more. Employers want to see that you're comfortable communicating, not just accurate." "Like this?" She smiled broadly, and I nodded. "Perfect. You're going to do great in that interview." After Elena left, I stayed to help Marco, a construction worker practicing for his Canadian immigration interview. Then Linda, a teacher preparing for a position in Japan. Each conversation was purposeful, honest, directed toward goals that were clearly defined and honestly pursued. "Mr. Royce," said Mrs. Santos, the center coordinator, as I was packing up my materials, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. You are very good at this, very patient. Most volunteers get frustrated with the grammar mistakes, the slow progress, but you never do. Why?" I considered her question while straightening the papers in my folder. Why did I find this work so fulfilling when it was basically the same thing I'd done with Mela? Teaching English, helping someone build confidence, supporting dreams of a better life? "I guess because everyone here is honest about what they want," I said finally. "They need English for specific jobs, specific opportunities. There's no pretending, no hidden motivations. It's just practical help for practical goals." Mrs. Santos nodded thoughtfully. "You sound like someone who learned that distinction the hard way." I laughed, but it wasn't bitter anymore. Let's just say I paid for a lot of expensive lessons. Walking home through the busy streets of Cebu, I reflected on how different my life had become. The apartment I rented was small but comfortable, located in a neighborhood where foreigners were common enough to be unremarkable but not so concentrated that every interaction felt like a transaction. I'd made friends with my neighbors, learned to navigate the local markets, even picked up enough Cebuano to handle basic conversations. I wasn't trying to rescue anyone or build a fantasy future with someone half my age. I was just living, day by day, finding purpose in small acts of service and genuine human connection. Sometimes I wondered what had happened to Mela. Had she chosen David from Texas, or one of the other men in her portfolio? Had she made it to America, or found something better closer to home? Part of me hoped she'd found happiness, whatever form it took. She'd never been cruel, just practical in ways I hadn't understood until it was too late. The lessons she'd taught me had been expensive but valuable. I'd learned the difference between being needed and being useful, between loving someone and financing their escape from you, between building a partnership and subsidizing an audition. Most importantly, I'd learned that purpose didn't require romance. Helping Elena prepare for her nursing job felt just as meaningful as anything I'd done with Mela. Maybe more so because it was based on genuine mutual respect rather than unspoken transaction. That evening, I sat on my small balcony watching the sunset and planning tomorrow's lesson materials. Mrs. Santos had asked if I'd be interested in developing a curriculum for hospitality workers, and I was excited about the challenge. Real work, with real people, toward real goals. My phone buzzed with a message from Katie, my daughter. We'd been talking more since I moved to Cebu, our conversations finally moving beyond grief and blame toward something that felt like actual relationship. "Dad, I'm proud of what you're doing there. Mom would be too." I smiled and typed back. "Thanks, sweetheart. I'm finally learning how to be useful again." As the sky darkened and the city lights came alive below me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Contentment. Not the desperate happiness of someone grasping at dreams that weren't his to begin with, but the quiet satisfaction of a man who'd found his place in the world. I'd come to the Philippines looking for love and found education instead. Not the kind of education I'd planned to pay for, but the kind I'd actually needed. I'd learned that generosity without boundaries becomes exploitation, that kindness without wisdom becomes manipulation, that love without honesty becomes transaction. But I'd also learned that there were people in the world who genuinely needed help, who would use that help for exactly what they said they'd use it for, who would appreciate it without taking advantage of it. The old fisherman had been right. Some people were smarter than others. But intelligence came in different forms. Mela had been smart enough to see opportunity where I saw love. I'd finally become smart enough to see the difference. Tomorrow I'd go back to the language center and help more people prepare for real opportunities with honest goals. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. More than enough. It felt like everything.